Good morning, one and all. Peter Kokot, one of the most respected members of the House of Representatives, served the state's 1st Hampshire district for 16 years until his sudden death in February. The district consists of Northampton, Westhampton, Southampton, and Hatfield in Hampshire County, and Montgomery in Hampden County. Seeking to succeed the beloved gentle giant known as Peter Kokot are his longtime district director Diana Zinal of Hatfield, activist Lindsay Sabadosa of Northampton, director of the Pioneer Valley Women's March. Both are in studio right now and will be for the next 3 hours as WHMP presents another in a series in this extraordinary election season, Wild West Mass, as we attempt to hold in-depth forums showcasing every race affecting the political future of the Valley. The primary will be held on September 4, with no Republican challenger in November. The election, for all intents and purposes, will be decided on September 4th. So good morning, Diana and Lindsay.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good morning.
I could put up your microphone. That would actually help. Huh? There you go. How you doing? There are a couple of ways for listeners to take part in this forum. To talk directly to either candidate, you can call our listener line at 413-586-7140, or you can text me at 413-695-7171.
You're giving out your phone number again.
I'm giving out my phone number. I'm going to give out my address next, right? But you got the low seat today, Denise. Jeez, look at you. Way down there. Anyway, we'll put your question on the air. Again, my text is 695-7171. The listener line, 586-7140. This program will be repeated tonight from 7 to 9 p.m. on 101.5, 107.5 FM, and 1400 and 1240 AM live stream at WHMP.com. Want to get us started, Denise?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Good morning to both of you. Good morning.
How's it going so far? We'll start with you, Diana. How's the campaign going?
It's going great. It's energizing and invigorating and feeling a lot of support, and it's the home stretch now. I'm sure Lindsay feels that too. It's gone by fast, but I'm feeling good, feeling confident, and really happy with the amount of support I'm finding out there.
You out there knocking on doors this summer?
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
Lindsay, how's it going for you?
It's really fun. I've been enjoying it so much. The team that I've put together is amazing. They're showing up in really huge ways. We're finding a lot of support in the community. People seem to be energized. They want to talk about the elections. They want to talk about issues really in depth, which is wonderful. And you know, there's this election, and then there's the state Senate race, and people are just participating, and that is always the best thing to see.
It's a very engaged area that we're having these races in, so that's a good thing, even though it's summer, and it's tough to run a campaign during the summer with the election, this primary being the day after Labor Day. Are you either of you concerned about a low voter turnout because of that, Diana?
I'm not. I actually think we're going to have a decent voter turnout. There's a lot of interest in this race. There's certainly a lot of interest in the Senate race. That's just a crazy race. I'm very happy to be tucked in nice and cozy with Lindsay in this House race. And even the Secretary of State race is going to bring things out. So I actually think turnout's going to be really decent. I think turnout's going to be decent.
Lindsay, what are you expecting?
Well, it will be interesting to watch. The Northampton and Hatfield have both the state representative and the state Senate race, so I am hoping that will increase turnout. Northampton tends to vote at fairly high rates, and of course, fairly high rates being like in the upper 20s, low 30s, so that's still a good 70% of the population that doesn't vote. It would be nice to see that change. But I do hope that in Northampton and Hatfield we'll see a higher voter turnout. Southampton also has a contested election coming up. So it will be interesting. I know that the day after Labor Day is really hard for people.
Yeah.
There are schools in the area that will not yet be back in session, so there are a lot of things to consider in planning a campaign.
I also want to talk about something that is in the news just this week. We did this story yesterday that a fiscal research group says that the slow rollout of the recreational marijuana sales in Massachusetts is casting a doubt on the projected state revenue from the cannabis taxes. I'll refresh our listeners' memories. The annual state budget that was approved by lawmakers last week does assume $63 million in revenue from the 17% state sales tax on marijuana sales. But that estimate was made when there was the expectation that those sales were going to start July 1st. They have not yet. Only one marijuana retailer has been licensed by the Cannabis Control Commission, and not one pot shop has opened. And this is the Mass Taxpayers Foundation, says it has analyzed the new budget and says it's not likely that it's going to hit the $63 million target for those taxes. What do lawmakers do in the event that this is that this comes in much lower than that projected? Lindsay, we'll start with you this time.
Well, I'm not quite sure why that's a surprise. We knew that this rollout was going much slower than anticipated. There have been a lot of complaints about this. So sort of projecting the budget, you know, counting your chickens before they hatch, so to speak, isn't wise. You know, the budget was really late this year. It will require some, hopefully not some cuts, but hopefully there'll be a new budget that will be rolled out a little bit earlier, a stopgap like happened this year.
Well, do you think that lawmakers, the budget was so late in coming? It was well beyond the fiscal year that this budget was passed. Did lawmakers really drop the ball with this, with coming in so late and with expecting those revenues or putting those in?
You know, it's hard because they have to reconcile, but I do think we were the only state in the country whose budget was this late, so it's a little hard to say there wasn't any ball dropping. But, you know, I would have been excited had lawmakers come together a little bit sooner, that the Senate and the House got together and really reconciled that budget earlier. It is hard to see that the governor has, you know, veto power over things without the State House being able to come back and rectify anything that he might cut, so.
Diana?
It was late. It should have been earlier, but it's still manageable, and they will be able to do overrides of. I think they're expecting to be in Saturday and Sunday to take care of any overrides of any vetoes that the governor does. And in terms of if there's a shortfall from the projected cannabis revenue, that'll be able to be dealt with a supplemental budget.
The Mass Taxpayers Foundation says it is unfortunate lawmakers did not lower the marijuana revenue estimates. So we'll see what happens.
Talk about this for just a minute, about Peter. The district has gone without representation since his death. Can each of you comment on the urgency of that and what you see as Peter's legacy? Diana.
Oh, Peter's legacy. You know, the outpouring of support when he passed was really overwhelming, and how respected he was. I think that his legacy was in being a very thoughtful and caring legislator. Certainly the pieces of legislation he left behind, the ethics reform, public records reform, the healthcare bill, speak to his abilities and his intellect and his commitment to public service. In his absence, you know, I'm still working for the district, still helping constituents, still working closely with communities on a daily basis. It's very busy, actually, because there's also the Senate office. Things have changed over there, so I'm finding getting a lot more constituent calls and constituent work. So I continue to do that. I work closely with other legislators locally to put forth anything we need in terms of the budget or in terms of legislation. I talk with John Sybeck almost daily. He's been really terrific. Was able to make sure that some things were put in the budget, like Grow Food Northampton and things like that, so that Peter's priorities could continue to move forward and be recognized. And still working on some special legislation things for communities. So those things are still there. They're still happening.
Can you explain for those listeners who may not know, when you say you're still working, what capacity that you are working in?
Still as the district director, the same capacity that I always was working in. I'll be able to do that until the seat is filled. And it's something I'm very committed to. You know, I actually think, you know, on a weekly basis, maybe I'll take a day or two off, and I end up not being able to take much time off because I'm busy and constituents still need somebody, they still need me, and so I'm still plugging along and still doing that. It's really important, very committed to that.
And Lindsay,
I'm sorry.
you can speak to the late Peter Philpott's legacy.
Yeah, it has definitely been hard as a constituent not having representation at the State House, both on the House and the Senate side. I was recently at the State House with groups of constituents for an advocacy day, and you know, we don't have anyone who's voting for us. So it really doesn't matter if we have other people we can talk to. There is really no one who can cast a vote for this district, and that really matters. So it's been frustrating. On the upside, we've been talking to the speaker more because the argument is if we don't have representation, we have to go to the speaker. So spending a lot of time in his office and talking about priorities for the district, and that's been fun and a different experience. I would like to see Peter's legacy be a single-payer healthcare bill. It was something that he was in favor of. The healthcare bill that bears his name does not include a path to single-payer at all. And that's frustrating because there were many of us who met with him regularly to talk about this, and I would love to see that legislation truly passed and in his honor, because he was the one who was trying to pioneer that.
And we heard a bit from Diana about what she does. Tell us about what you do, what you've done before this campaign that leads you to where you are running for this seat.
Well, I'm running for this seat because I'm an organizer and an advocate, and I've spent pretty much my entire life doing those things. I spent a lot of time trying to get legislation passed, particularly on the state level, that best serves the needs of all people. And it's a frustrating process. You spend time at the State House and you realize that things move very slowly, that it is a very top-down process, that people find it difficult to be engaged, and to really understand how things work, particularly with committees and how hearings run and how votes are taken, and those are all things that really need to change, and that's why I decided it was time. I certainly would never ever have run against Peter. I had a huge amount of respect for him and his intelligence and his ability to really delve into the weeds of policy, and that's special. There are not many people who have that ability. So he was truly great in that respect, and I admired him greatly. But when the seat did open, it felt like it was time for somebody to step up who was going to say things do need to change in Boston.
Very, very quickly, Lindsay, follow up on that a little bit. What are a couple of issues facing the 1st Hampshire where a state rep can really have some impact?
Well, the 3 issues that I talk about a lot are indeed Medicare for all, education funding reform, and transportation. And I see the 3 as also very interconnected. There's no issue that doesn't relate to many, many others. And the other thing that I've been talking about lately, because I'm trying to understand in greater depth how we actually see economic development. We can talk about it as a buzzword, right? But what does that really mean? How does it really happen? And I see it boiling down to affordable housing. And that is something that we lack in Northampton. Just perpetually, we lack affordable housing for very low-income communities, and then we lack affordable housing for that middle ground. And we see a lot of people moving out of district because of that. We see people moving to surrounding towns where they can live and work, and I would really like to reverse that trend.
Diana.
I would agree that education, healthcare, economic development, and I'm also a real passionate supporter of agriculture. So those are the things that I am really, really passionate about. We know we need to reform the education funding formula. There's been some work towards that, that's some progress, but I think we can do a little bit better. We have districts here that struggle under the weight of regional transportation, and that's something that we need to continue to make progress on. Removing healthcare costs from school budgets, and then there's the whole charter issue and the funding of charter schools and how that adversely affects public education. We need to work on changing the formula so that isn't a price that public school students face. I have 3 public school students myself. Healthcare, obviously, I would agree that we need to start moving towards single-payer healthcare. I think that it needs to happen very deliberately and slowly. What I want to see is a successful program. Something that doesn't fail. So I'd really want to be involved in doing that and doing it right and doing it well. Economic development is something I've been involved with over the years, both in my capacity. I was a Hatfield selectman for years, and we had some experience with that. And certainly in my 16 years working with Peter, I've had the opportunity to work on economic development pieces. I'm working on one right now in Hatfield that's really exciting. It's a company that manufactures energy efficient products, and we're going to be able to hopefully set them up with some grant money to improve some infrastructure to allow them to expand their business. So economic development isn't just a buzzword for me. I've done it. I know what it looks like. I know how to do it. And then agriculture, of course, has an economic component as well. But the farms here are really important, and we need to make sure that we're supporting them and making sure that they can stay sustainable.
So I just want to say economic development sounds like a buzzword, though if you are a business owner downtown Northampton and we're seeing lots of empty storefronts, we're seeing rising rents, we're seeing people moving out of district, we're seeing it hard to find employees. It does feel like a bit of a buzzword when you have a politician say it without offering any real concrete answers of how we solve those problems.
I have answers.
The issue of climate change is still being debated, certainly not on these airwaves, but it's pretty apparent that little will ever be done to reduce the effects at the federal level. But what can we do, Lindsay?
Well, there's a lot that we can do. First of all, we need to increase our renewable portfolio standards. That is an easy thing to do, and that can be done through the State House. We also need to start investing more, because if we're going to start moving towards solar and wind, which we absolutely need to do, we need to move towards 100% green energy, and we need to do that much faster than I think anyone anticipates, because we like the State House and we don't want to see it underwater. We are going to need to start investing in battery technology. We're going to need to know how to store this energy that we are producing. So I'm excited because I think that those are things that can happen in Western Massachusetts. We need to be, obviously careful as we move forward in this. There's, a new project proposed in West Hampton right now where they're going to be clear-cutting forest in order to install solar. I would really like to see projects come in, though, where we are not cutting down trees. Trees are sort of our last sink. We used to have the ocean, which absorbed carbon, and now that's full and overheating and overflowing, and trees are what is going to pull the carbon in. So I would like to see projects instead located on stores, in parking lots, where we are really getting a lot of solar into the valley, but we're doing it in smarter ways.
Diana?
I would agree. We need to quicken our race to renewables. There's this is the intersecting priorities. We can do this. I almost spilled my water. We can do this. We can get there while we focus on economic development and the jobs and technology and things that you need to actually get there. We have the university as a resource on that, as a resource on storage and getting to better storage so that these solar arrays and getting to a grid that's solarized will be more reliable, more safe, more secure. And all of those things, while they cost money, they also generate some good things for the economy. So I think we need to look at it like that. Carbon pricing is something we need to think about. And I think that solar being available to low and middle income families is really, really critical. People just can't afford it. Now people have it and they can't go online because there's the net metering cap, so we need to lift the net metering cap and get these projects online. I agree that, I love the parking lot solar. I think that's great. I'm disappointed we're not seeing more of that pop up. We're seeing some, but I think we should see a lot more. And that's something that I would definitely push for.
Can I make a little plug, though, because there is a local initiative that I really, really love, because it's about it's about stopping pipelines from coming into the area, because there is that constant push, right? And so there is the group Button Up Northampton, which I've been knocking on a lot of doors, and I see that they have also been knocking on a lot of doors. It encourages homeowners to get energy audits done and then to find ways, it's a collaboration of programs so that homeowners and renters can find ways to make their homes more efficient. And that, to me, is just this beautiful part of where we live, right? That there are people out there taking the initiative to bring this information to folks so that we can stop our dependency on fossil fuels.
Remember, you can get involved, listeners. You can call us at 586-7140. We'll put you right on the air. You can text me at 695-7171 if you have a question or a comment for our candidates, Lindsay Sabadosa and Diana Zymal. Denise?
We've heard time and again that this is the year of the woman in general, but specifically politically. And while there are some other local races in the valley where there are men running and women running, not in this race. And the winner of this seat most likely will be determined in this primary on September 4th. So can each of you tell me what it means to you to be potentially a woman serving in the legislature that is only right now 25% female? We'll start with Diana.
It means the world to me. So, I'm very excited that more women are getting involved. For me, it's really nothing new. I first ran for elected office and won over 18 years ago. So this is sort of a continuation of that for me. I think that it's very likely that we could have a full female slate in Western Massachusetts, which is extremely exciting to me. There's really super qualified candidates in all the other races. So I'm really proud to be a part of that. I think that we need more women in politics, and we need more qualified women in politics, and I'm really proud to be part of that movement.
Why? Why do we need more women?
Women are so good at managing priorities. I think, I can speak for me personally. What I bring to this race is a level of compassion. Having worked with constituents all these years, you develop a real sense of compassion towards constituents, and I think that maybe a woman's touch is what I'm trying to refer to. But I think mainly managing priorities and protecting our families and their education and their health. We're all a bit of a mama bear, so I think you bring that component to it.
Lindsay?
Well, I just want to say, I remember the first year of the woman, right? Wasn't that 1993?
I believe so.
And that, I refer to that year a lot. I've given a few talks locally about that year because that was right after the Anita Hill, I want to call it trial, even though it wasn't really a trial. And it was very impactful to me. I was young at that time. I won't say how young. But it really, watching that hearing really solidified in me why it is so important to have representation, because it's not really about this like, I'm a mother and so I will view things differently. It's about having people who have that lived experience in office, and that is something that we don't have. We see the way legislation is passed when there are women in office. It's different. When Senator Chandler took over in the Senate, all of a sudden the Nasty Woman Bill, which repealed a lot of archaic laws surrounding abortion and reproductive rights, that passed. And it was important that it passed. It needed to. It was time. It was simple. But it gets held up unless the people making the decisions have a greater understanding of what that looks like. And we see this around healthcare in particular. We all have seen that image of the Trump administration coming in and the healthcare committee in Congress being made up of a bunch of white men who I don't think are particularly qualified to make decisions about healthcare that really impact this entire country. I'm also on the board of directors of Emerge Massachusetts, so I'm involved in training women to run for office. I've been involved for a while now, and it's wonderful because we are putting qualified women in office. We have been putting qualified women in office, and we're going to continue to do so.
2 women in the race, so there will be, because there's no Republican challenger, looks as though that there will be a woman who is elected to this seat. And what is the number one thing that you see as distinguishing you from the other candidate? And this time we'll start with you, Lindsay.
Sure. Well, I think, we're both running as Democrats, so I believe that there are some shared values, but I think that we're very, very different Democrats. I certainly am a very progressive Democrat who believes in government that really involves the people, and that involves people who, didn't necessarily know who our state rep was. There are a lot of people who have felt disengaged and disconnected, particularly from state level politics. A lot of attention is paid to the municipal, a lot of attention is paid to the federal, but we have this huge segment of the population who just has no idea what is happening in Boston. And I'm running on policies that I see reflected in this community, things that people really, really want. When we talk about single healthcare payer, I know that the vast majority of people in this community are desperately looking for that, and not in 20 years, much sooner, because they understand it is the linchpin to solving a lot of our social and economic issues in this state. It's understanding what this community is like, understanding that government needs to change, and understanding that we're going to need to use new techniques to implement policies that we haven't done in the past because the status quo is not working for people.
Diana?
Well, obviously, I think that the distinction is our experience. I mean, I have over 20 rock solid years of government and public service experience. It's critical to this job. There's no question. So we've lost. I'm also a progressive Democrat. We haven't really seen any differences between us in terms of platform yet. But getting back to the experience piece, we lost Peter, which was, devastating. We then lost Stan. John Cybeck's retiring, Steve Kulik's retiring. It's really important that we understand, we have people in this position who understand how government works, how towns work, how towns interface with state agencies. That's a big component of this job. It doesn't get talked about often enough. So there's the policy piece of the job, which is really important and really exciting as we look ahead. But there's also the budget piece of the job. You have to have some knowledge and some experience in dealing with budgets and managing priorities when you do that. I've watched that. Watched Peter do that for 16 years, but I also have experience with that in Hatfield, running the Hatfield budget, having to make those tough decisions. There's the community piece of this job. The town and the city of Northampton, the 4 outlying towns, rely heavily on the state rep to interface with state agencies, to work on those economic development pieces. You have to have some knowledge about how all of that works, and I do. And then there's the constituent piece. I consider myself, frankly, the constituent queen. 16 years in the trenches, working with constituents on a day-to-day basis. Not one constituent issue was the same. Being able to help a constituent navigate through the sometimes complicated and cumbersome state agency that they may be dealing with, whether it's Mass Health or the registry or you name it, that is a really critical piece of this job. And I have that experience, and that's where I think that I'm the best choice.
Remember, you can text us at 695-413-695-7171 or call at 586-7140 to talk to either Diana Zimal or Lindsay Sabadosa or both. We have our text right here. I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I will kind of do more in depth right now. For the candidates, the text goes, one of the big differences between you two is your take on single-payer health care, how quickly it can become reality. Please explain your positions on this issue. Diana.
Right, so Peter Kokot started talking to me about single-payer healthcare 16 years ago when I first started working for him when he was first elected. It was something he was really passionate about. He became chair of healthcare finance. If anybody was going to be able to get single-payer healthcare through quickly, it was going to be Peter Kokot. It's clear that this needs to be, as I said, very careful and very deliberate. There's really been no substantive and really clear analysis of how this works. And in addition to that, some of the proposals are based on assumptions of the federal government allowing us to use their federal monies as part of this. So this will be, I'm not saying 20 years, but I don't think it's going to happen in the next legislative session. I'm being realistic. I'm always going to be realistic. And I think that, I also favor looking at it in terms, it would be so great if our neighboring states could be coming on board at the same time. We have a lot of people who live here, work in Connecticut, or vice versa. It would be nice if all of that could tie together. So I really see this as looking at this and making it the most successful program possible, not the quickest program possible.
Lindsay.
So the fight for single-payer healthcare has been going on for 20 years. There are many people in this community who have been involved in that fight for just as long. In fact, the organization in Massachusetts who has been doing this is MassCare. I've been endorsed by them. So we know what models look like. We know the stakeholders that need to come to the table. We know who our advocates are in the State House. And Peter in particular was studying how this worked. I mean, we had sat down with him and given him models. He was doing research, what it looks like in Canada, what it could look like in California, New York, Vermont, what the financing really needs to look like in order for it to be successful, because that is the huge component, right? We need to make sure that not only can we implement this system, but that it's really going to save the state money and provide universal, affordable health care for everyone. I just lost my train of thought a little bit. I'm so sorry.
And welcome to the club.
I know, right? Well, I get very passionate about single payer because it is something that we need to implement in the near future. And one of the pieces of legislation, I got my train of thought back, that would ensure that we could do such a thing was a bill filed by Representative Jensen. Peter had wanted to see that bill filed as a clean bill. It had been submitted on the Senate side as part of the budget and passed. It did not, unfortunately, pass the House, but that bill would have asked for a 3-year independent study comparing what the state of Massachusetts spends on healthcare now and what we would spend with a single-payer system. And it would require the state to move towards single-payer should we find that there can be savings and that we can fund it. Now, we spend 42% of our budget on healthcare. We talk about all the things that we can't fund. we need to fix healthcare. Healthcare is not working. My family has had a healthcare crisis where we have found that private insurance, which as a self-employed person who also works with budgets, I know, like, healthcare does not cover everything. No matter what kind of wonderful policy you might have, everyone in this valley has had a healthcare crisis or knows someone who has or has had a healthcare emergency, and it's not something we can wait for. We are the only country in the world that is not doing this.
Well, sanctuary cities like Northampton. I have a frog in my throat. There it goes. They've been singled out by the Trump administration. Congressman Jim McGovern, among others, has called for abolishing ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the agency involved in rounding up and deporting illegal immigrants. Is it time, we'll start with you, Lindsay, is it time for ICE to go?
So first of all, undocumented immigrants, and yes, it is time for ICE to go. ICE is a mismanaged organization. It is the only body that is able to use paramilitary tactics almost in order to go after what is a civil offense. We do not see the IRS coming to people's homes and rounding them up for tax fraud. So I think that the tactics that are being used are disgraceful. I think they are morally corrupt. And I think that it is time for this country to absolutely get rid of ICE and focus on some real immigration reform. I was extremely disappointed that the State House did not pass the Safe Communities Act. They had every opportunity to do so. They did not. I find it repugnant and frankly racist to not have done so.
Diana.
I would like to see the state pass the Safe Communities Act as well. I think that it's safe to, I think it'll happen in the next session. I would have liked to have seen it this session as well. I agree we need to overhaul immigration policy in general. There needs to be an easier pathway to legal immigration. We're making it too hard. Obviously, families being ripped apart and this rounding up of people is a disgrace. ICE is out of control. ICE needs to go. I think that the main thing is to be we need to be welcoming, and we need to button up those federal laws so that people can do this in a way that shouldn't take as long, shouldn't be as hard, shouldn't be as expensive.
Well, and we also need to make sure that we're letting people come into this country who, as refugees, as needed, and I think that is one of the huge disgraces of the Trump administration right now. We have people coming in from countries where there is extreme gang violence. I'm a legal financial translator. I actually do a lot of immigration work, so I get to read first-hand accounts from families about gang violence in their communities, about people circling their houses at night with machetes, about just war and drugs and things that a lot of times the United States has caused in their home country to begin with, that they're trying to escape from, and they find themselves at our borders being separated from their families. We are putting babies in cages. The fact that the Massachusetts State House can't do something as simple as say, hey, Massachusetts doesn't want a Muslim ban, or we don't want 287G agreements with our sheriff. I mean, this wasn't the time to wait. This was the time to step up and do something.
I'd like to ask a two-pronged question. The first one is, how do we make up for the loss of that political clout on Beacon Hill with the loss of so many long-time state lawmakers that are not going back to Beacon Hill from Western Mass? How do we make up for that? And number one, and number two, what is your first priority as an elected legislator? And let's start with Diana.
You know, I think we make up for the clout by electing somebody like myself who has experience, who has relationships with state agencies, has relationships with other legislators. I will be able to work on, I'm already working with those things, so that will just be a continuation of what I'm doing already, and I think that will go a long way. Obviously, we'll need to build a coalition right away among the new Western Mass legislators. That was something, you know, I like to say that I was lucky enough to work with the golden age of Western Mass delegation when we had Ellen and we had everybody on board, and it was such a great thing. So I've seen what that looks like when there's a lot of collaboration among the legislators out here, and I think that's one way to do it, so that we can be a unified voice from Western Mass in dealing with Boston and that whole, you know, east-west thing. I think, what was the other part of the question?
Your first priority as an elected legislator?
Yeah, it's going to be education and education funding. That's going to be my first priority, absolutely, top priority.
Lindsay?
You know, I really believe in coalition building in very strong ways, and it has always confused me as to why a lot of representatives in Western Mass have not had stronger coalitions with representatives in other parts of the state, because we have similar issues. When we talk about education funding, for example, we can come together. When we talk about climate change, we can come together. There are very similar values between different communities, and that is an opportunity that I would like to see taken advantage of more often. I mentioned I'm on the board of directors of Emerge Massachusetts, so I already have very deep connections with many members of the State House. I also have been endorsed by many, many progressive organizations, and what's been amazing about that is that all of the representatives and senators who have gained those endorsements in the past sort of become your mentors, and they get really excited about having a new person who's of that same mindset that they can then work with and help you in the campaign process more than anything, where they're like, yes, this is crazy and all these crazy things will happen, and let me guide you through that. So that's been really important, and I look forward to working with those people as well. And, you know, as a progressive, it is single payer. That is what we need to do to move forward. I firmly believe that we need to change the education funding reform formula, but we don't have the money to do it unless we solve healthcare. We don't have the money to do it, to implement transportation, infrastructure reform, all these things that we need to see unless we fix healthcare.
Let's follow up on that a little bit. The complicated and dwindling state funding system for public schools. And then we have the charters that seem to operate under different rules.
Yeah.
What can be done here? What can be done? What can we do to fix this mess? Diane?
In terms of the charter school funding, you know, there's now, I realize charter schools, we have some great ones out here, and I have some friends who are having really positive experiences with their children in charter schools. So I don't want to just completely come out swinging on it. But the reality is that charter school monies are not put under the same scrutiny as public school monies, even though it's public money. So money comes from the towns, goes to the charter schools, and then we don't monitor it anymore. That has to change. The other thing that has to change with charter schools is they need to be unionized. That's something that I feel really strongly about, that the teachers there need to be unionized. So those are things that I would like to see happen. You know, with the education funding, that's a big part of it.
Lindsay?
I'm sorry, Diana mentioned unionizing charter school teachers, and I just worry that that leads to an increase in charter schools and a strengthening of the movement to lift the cap on charter schools. So it's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. In terms of education funding, you know, we can talk about the details, and definitely the charter schools they're given more money. Then, you know, if a student's school choice is out of district, a student who goes to a charter school is given more money, and that is a problem. But the root cause of this is actually economic inequality, right? Creating multi-tiered systems for different communities based on the affluence of those communities. And that is the real issue that we need to get down to and acknowledge, that we have created a funding formula where well-off towns do better than poor towns, and we need to change our funding formula so that we aren't so consistently focused on keeping the rich rich and the poor poor.
The discussion. I would like to address higher education funding. We hear so much about Max Page from the Public Higher Education Network in Massachusetts. He's from Amherst and has now just been elected as the Vice President of the Massachusetts Teachers Association. He's a regular guest here on our radio station. He talks about how we need community college that is funded and at no cost to the students, and also more state aid for state colleges and universities so that cost is not passed on so much to the students. Can you both address that? We'll start with Lindsay.
So I'm really excited that Max was elected. He's fabulous. And I fully agree. We need to have free community college, and we need to make sure that we're funding our state colleges in a much better way than we've previously been doing. I mean, it's really burdensome for families to afford UMass at this point. And UMass is this incubator of ideas and research, and if we want to see development in the area, we need to make sure we're supporting that. I have been doing a lot of research into this because I'm curious as to how we really fund things. I like concrete solutions to problems. And so it's, you know, there are ways ways to fund community college. I'm interested in this idea of a voucher system so that students can then use those funds to attend other colleges, because student loan debt is crushing. And it is another reason that I think we see people leaving this area, because we have students who come here, they do amazing work at grad school, they contribute a lot to this community, but then because they can't find jobs in the area that pay enough for them to pay off the ridiculous loans that they are having to take out, and we're seeing, federal laws changing around what can be written off, what you can, if there were previously programs that you could become involved in, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, other things where you were then able to have that debt reduced. Those things are being taken away, and then we have this private student loan industry that is just, you can't ever get rid of that debt, and it follows you for years and years and years. And I have many friends who in the area who are attorneys, who are physicians, and even in their 40s and 50s, they are still paying off college loans. That's an untenable solution moving forward. It's preventing people from buying homes, it's preventing people from switching jobs, it's making, people make decisions about whether or not to have children based on how much debt they have. So these are things that the state is going to need to look at. It would be amazing if our federal government would step up, but I have very little faith in the moment of that happening. So I do think we're going to need to start looking at that on the state level as well.
How do we pay for it at the state level?
Well, I think one of the things that we really need to talk about on the state level is our taxes. We have the lowest tax rate that we've had in 30 years. We have a lot of very regressive taxes in Massachusetts, and by that I mean taxes that are the same rate for absolutely everybody. So whether you make $8 an hour or you make $800 an hour, you are still paying that same percentage. Obviously, if you make $8 an hour, that's a lot more burdensome. We need to make sure that we're raising our tax rate and we're offering lots and lots of credit so that the poor and the middle class are not paying more, but that we are actually having richer folks pay more. And I would, of course, love to see the Fair Share Amendment come back on. I know that it's been refiled. It's going to take 2 legislative sessions, but hopefully by 2022, that can come into effect. And that would be a game changer.
Possible with a Republican governor? Is there enough support in the legislature to override?
We're not always going to have a Republican governor, are we?
I don't know.
Because the day after this election ends, I will be knocking doors in the gubernatorial race for whoever wins that primary. This is an important race.
Diana, let's address the higher ed piece of this for us.
Right, so I'm glad this came up because I'm really passionate about public higher ed, and I will say I have skin in this game. So I have an HCC student and I have one headed off to UMass in the fall. I'm also someone who never finished their bachelor's degree because I simply couldn't afford it. I was at UMass and I ran out of money, and I was deathly afraid of taking out a student loan, and I've been grateful for a long time that I didn't do that. So I completely get this. We need to we need to continue making an investment in public higher ed. I do like the idea of community college being free. I like the idea of loan forgiveness programs. I like the idea of dual enrollment, different things that can cut down the expense to students. I don't support free public higher ed at the university level, and the reason for that is, the university is basically, it's a city, right? We see it from afar, it's a city. And I've had the opportunity to sit down with Chancellor Sabadosa. He's been really terrific about including me in some small meetings with local legislators about the university and its needs. And I feel like the money that we spend at UMass is an investment, not an expense. That comes back to us. It's an economic driver here. The Chancellor has made great strides in having UMass sort of climb the ladder and being recognized as a leading research university. And that only helps us, even with some of the things we talked about before, with battery storage and getting closer to renewables and everything like that. So we do need to, I also support the Fair Share Amendment and bringing that back. And of course, increasing the line items for public higher ed as much as we possibly can.
We're going to have to go to break pretty soon. I'm going to give you a quickie and an easy one. Diana, who would you like to see run against Donald Trump?
Oh my gracious.
You can
Javal Patrick.
Yeah!
Kamala Harris.
Nice. Okay.
I've been thinking about this for a while.
I can see that. We'll have more with Lindsay Sabadosa and Diana Zinal debating for the 1st Hampshire District right after this. Attempt to go to the phone line now. Good morning. Yeah, hey, how you doing?
Good. I have about experience with the campaign.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if they could both Boston on Capitol Hill working on legislation and what they feel like they've accomplished there in Boston?
Want to go first, Lindsay?
Sure, I'm happy to go first. Well, I spend a lot of time at the State House. It is important to me to be in the building, to develop relationships with legislators in the building, to understand where they really stand on issues, and to make sure that people from Western Mass are coming from the Pioneer Valley, are really getting in and understanding that process. So, sometimes that's going down for an advocacy day, it's setting up meetings with legislators, it's bringing people to hearings. It's really exciting to see people testify at hearings at the State House for the first time. A lot of people don't even realize they can do that. They don't know what those schedules look like. And so facilitating that is really exciting. And, if you aren't in the building, you just aren't involved. And so it's been one of my focuses.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
So for me, I just want to point out that I am the only person Peter ever hired, which means that I was really, a lot of people don't know that. I was very involved with every aspect of his service. And so obviously in supporting his mission, that was my main job, was to support his mission. And so that's where my experience with legislation comes, is from watching him, supporting him, seeing how he got it done, and we all know he did it very well. So I couldn't have had a better teacher.
Do you have any other questions, caller?
Of course I have experience in Boston. I will tell you that I was district focused, which I actually think puts me in a really great position moving forward, because the best way to move forward and serve your constituents is to know them and to know the issues out here in the district completely. And that I have rock solid.
Right. And I believe that as an organizer...
Wait.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll let the caller talk.
Go ahead.
Of course I understand that process.
Lindsay, you had a...
No, I was just going to say, and as a community organizer, one of the things that I'm constantly doing is talking to people, figuring out what their issues are, talking to them about legislation that they can get involved in that best serves their needs in the community. And that's what an organizer does.
Caller, where are you calling from? All right, good. Have a great day. By the way, the 1st Hampshire district, consists of Northampton, Westhampton, Southampton, and Hatfield in Hampshire County and Montgomery in Hampden County. Denise?
I wanted to ask you sort of a lifestyle question. We've talked a lot about policy this morning. What does your life have to look like, and how does it have to change if you win this election? We'll start with you, Lindsay. Is there anything that's going to be drastically different for you?
Oh, wow. So, it's really... I've been thinking a lot about change. Mm-hmm. And my daughter's at summer camp this week. And so when she goes to summer camp, I write her letters every year. She gets one a day from me that she can open up. And I share stories about my childhood and little bits of wisdom that I want to give her in life. And I don't know if she'll ever remember anything I say, but I do. And one of the things I wrote about was... going away and doing something different is really important, because people do not like change, and yet change is the thing that helps us grow. It is what brings us forward, and if you can learn that now, as an 11-year-old, you are going to be so much better prepared for life. And, I've had a lot of changes in my life. My partner of 17 years passed away 2 years ago, and that was a huge change. My daughter being born, moving, we've moved a lot. We've been here for 12 years. This is really exciting that we've been in one place for a long time, but I've moved a lot. My job is, I'm self-employed, I'm a legal financial translator, and that in and of itself is never the same. Every day is different. I have clients all over the world. Everything for me is always up in the air. And then when you add in organizing, life is always crazy, and I love that. And so taking on a new thing, being in Boston more, really delving into work that I love and that can affect change, that can really make a difference in the community, that's wonderful. And so in terms of changing my lifestyle, yeah, life changes. That's how it goes. And hopefully when I'm elected, life will change for the better for everyone in the district.
Diana?
So from a very practical standpoint, on this, hang on, let me take these off.
She's taking off
I
her
can
headphones, by the
take
way.
them off, yeah.
Taking off her headphones.
You know, I go into this job with my eyes wide open. I am well aware of the demands of this job, and they're extreme. You know, serving Peter and supporting Peter all those years, I can tell you, I know exactly what will be demanded of me. And this was a decision that I made thoughtfully, carefully with my family and with their support. I would expect to be 3 very long days a week in Boston. And my family's prepared to do that, and they're at a point in their lives where you know, that will work for me. That was an important part of the decision. Family comes first, and I wanted to make sure that I could balance this, and I can balance it. So I'm ready for that. I'm ready for that change, and I'm ready to work hard and bring this district game to Boston, and work hard for the constituents here.
I wanted to follow up a little bit on the call that we just had. Start with you, Diana. One of the most important things that a first-year legislator has got to do in order to be successful, right off the bat.
Right off the bat, build coalitions, build relationships with other legislators. We touched on that a little bit, with the local officials from the district who will end up relying on you quite a bit for a lot of things all the time. You're much more likely to be busy working on that stuff than the policy stuff, which you don't have the privilege to do as often. I have those things. Those things are already in place for me. I understand, you know, the issues here, so I don't really need to come up to speed. I think that's what's the most important thing, is being able to right away, particularly now, under these circumstances, having lost Peter and Stan's resignation, bringing those things is absolutely critical for the person who gets elected.
Lindsay?
Certainly, building coalitions is one of the most important things I think that anyone can do, and that really carries over to all areas of life, quite honestly. You know, we are living at a very interesting time in history. I like to bring it back to 1968 a lot because I'm a student of history, and I see us once again at a crossroads. And while we talk a lot about losing experience, we also have to acknowledge that we are at this turning point. And we have a federal government that is rolling a lot of things down. States are going to be even more important in passing legislation. We need to have people who understand their community, who would understand coalition building, who understand bridge building, who understand how to negotiate, and who have the energy and the courage to actually make really hard decisions. And people who understand what the problems are, because you cannot help solve anything unless you see what the issues are.
Ask you this. We'll start with you, Diana. Among the many things that frighten parents, there's a whole bunch of them, but anyway, they do fear for their kids' safety in the opioid epidemic, which shows no signs of abating right now. High school sports stars found dead at 20. What do you think went wrong here, and what can we do to make it right there?
I think there's a few things that went wrong. I mean, you know, first and foremost, we need to hold pharmaceutical companies responsible. The amount of prescriptions being handed out is alarming. I had an experience with that myself when my son was having his wisdom teeth out in a practice. Didn't even know they were going to do the surgery and was still trying to give me a Percocet prescription. I was kind of alarmed by that. I think that there's some progress being made. You know, I favor safe injection sites. I think that we need to focus on medically assisted treatment, and really just, there's a mental health component. I'm really concerned with mental health issues. That we have a crisis, we're failing, and we know that drug addiction and mental health illness often go hand in hand. So we need to really shore up how hard we're working on both of those issues.
Lindsay?
I spend a lot of time thinking about this issue, and I try to think about the issues that would lead someone to start using, and I always come back to these ideas of depression, anxiety, and trauma, and those are, of course, healthcare-related issues, and we are failing to provide affordable, quality healthcare to people, bringing it back to why we need Medicare for all so dramatically. You know, right now, though, we do have an opioid crisis, and we need to focus on harm reduction. We need to make sure that we are funding programs that look at harm reduction and that also offer treatment to those who want it. So that's making sure that there are really services available. There is never enough room, though, for everyone. I am in favor of the safe injection sites. I think that's really an exciting development. I know that this was just passed at the State House. I would also like to see more needle exchange programs. I would like to see a reversal of the recent Supreme Judicial Court ruling, which I think will lead to increased incarceration of people suffering from substance use disorder. And we need to get away from this idea that these are criminal justice issues. These are healthcare issues that we have avoided for years and years and years because, again, when they don't affect wealthy people, we don't pay a lot of attention. It all stems from economic inequality and racism. And so if we start to root that out, pay attention to what we're actually doing and make some policies, we might actually stand a chance at solving this.
Voters have a lot of responsibility in this race and all the others right now. You do get a sense that people are taking these races seriously. Tell someone listening right now why they should give their vote to you, and how do people find out more about your campaign, Lindsay?
Well, I believe that people should vote for me because I am a progressive Democrat and I talk about the progressive agenda, which is Medicare for all, it is education funding reform, it is transportation and free college and universal pre-K. But people should not vote for me simply because of those reasons. They should vote for me because I am going to be the candidate who gets people back into government. It is time that people feel engaged again. And that is why I'm going to be a different candidate. I am going to be the representative who tells people this is what's happening at the State House. This is what you can do to actually be part of the advocacy, to be part of the process. It's that idea of bottom-up government and not top-down government, which is what we have seen in Massachusetts, I think, since the Pilgrims got here and kind of ruined everything. In any case, that is why people should vote for me. They should absolutely, though, research my platform. They can find that information at lindsaysabadosa.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and yeah, just about everywhere on social media. And you know, I'm also really excited to talk to people. We have offices at 76 Gothic Street. People are welcome to stop in and talk about policy whenever they want. We have a whole bunch of listening sessions that I'm going to be doing, and we've posted those on the website and on Facebook, and people can really just come in and have in-depth conversations. And quite honestly, I will probably knock on your door too. We have done thousands and thousands and thousands of doors in district, and I'm going to keep going until election day, so you'll see me.
Diana Zahn?
They should elect me because I'm a progressive Democrat, and because I have really solid government experience. So the other components of the job are things that I am prepared to do right now. Actually, I'm doing them now, prepared to do them at the next level. We are reaching out to people as well, door knocking, a lot of phone banking. And I have a website, dianazinal.com. People can feel free to contact me. I actually will make my cell phone available. Is that okay to do over the air?
Sure.
413-575-2608. I'm happy to speak to anybody. I'm finding as I go through the grocery store, anywhere I go, people are coming up to me and wanting to talk about the campaign. So I think, I really think the bottom line is, how do we best replace the experience that we've lost with someone whose progressive values we can believe in? And so that makes me, I think, the best candidate moving forward.
Why don't we give you the last word, Denise?
Have we asked the political heroes question yet?
Do it.
Who are your political heroes, Diana?
My political heroes, Peter Kokot was my political, that's an easy one, but that's the truth. And I guess I would focus on local, Stan Rosenberg was another political hero of mine, and Peter, and John Sybeck, who's been just terrific, is a hero of mine, and Ellen Story. I had to add a woman to the list because Ellen really focused on some women's issues, important things, postpartum issues and things like that were things I could really, and equal pay. She was really, so I will focus on the local ones, and those would be my heroes.
Lindsay.
I have such a long list. I was just thinking of people who are in the State House now who I really admire, like Christine Barber, Margie Decker, Ruth Balzer. There are some great people. Senator Chandler, who's also a Wellesley alum, so I'm very excited to have a lot of Wellesley alums in the building. I really like our Attorney General Maura Healey, our state senator. I mentioned Kamala Harris earlier. There's a long list. And then, of course, I always go back to Robert Kennedy, who I think actually epitomized this idea of bringing people into politics in real ways, who go into the community and talk to people that nobody else spoke to, and that's who we need in office, someone who does that.
We're going to continue this conversation for another hour on the Bill Newman Show, which is coming up in our next hour.
That's right. And thank you, Diana Zinal, for coming in. So you hang out for a few minutes and wait for Bill. And Lindsay Sabadosa. So great to see you guys. A very spirited debate slash discussion that we had here this morning. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
We've got 8:58 in our morning here on 101.5 WHMP.
Welcome to the show and to the studio, Diane Zinal. She is the longtime district director for Peter Kokut, still holds that position, and Lindsay Sabadosa. She is a community organizer and director of the Pioneer Valley Women's March. They are competitors for the Democratic nomination for the district, the House of Representatives district that consists of Northampton, Westhampton, Southampton, and Hatfield, and also Montgomery. So 4 towns and cities in Hampshire
I
County.
didn't even know Montgomery was, I didn't even know Montgomery was a place.
Montgomery and Camden County. We will take the first 3 quarters of the show to continue the discussion that Diana and Lindsay were having with Bob Flaherty and Denise Bozella. So welcome. Thank you both for staying for another 45 minutes. We really appreciate it. I'd like to start, if I might, and I know this is upsetting to candidates who are working really, really hard, but not everyone in the district is actually paying attention yet. And we have this, I think, ludicrous date for a primary, the day after Labor Day, the first day of school for many schools, and no time. It's a bad system, in my opinion, to have the primaries in September altogether, and it's really an awful decision. And you get to vote against the Secretary of State if you want to, who set this up the day after Labor Day. So we're trying to have our listeners know what the issues are, who the candidates are, and what they stand for. So Diana Zinal and Lindsay Sabadosa, thank you again for being here. Let's start with, for those who have not been paying a lot of attention to this race yet, let's start with you, Diana. Why should they vote for you?
They should vote for me because I am a progressive Democrat, and I can back that up with 2 decades of rock-solid government and public service experience, which makes me uniquely qualified to perform this job, both in a legislative sense, but also in the sense of how the legislator benefits communities and constituents and handles budget matters. So I have experience with all of that, and will be able to move forward very quickly.
Let me pose the same question to Lindsay Sabadosa.
Well, I am a progressive Democrat who has also been endorsed by the Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts, Progressive Massachusetts, and Mass Alliance. I am a community organizer, and I spend a lot of time at the State House advocating to pass legislation. And that is legislation that the people in the community have been clamoring for many years. I am someone who is in the streets talking to regular people who are not always politically engaged on a daily basis, and my goal is to bring those people into government, to really make a change in how people are engaged, and to really focus on changing the top-down system that we currently have to a bottom-up system. So it's no longer a question of who are you best connected to, it's about government for the people.
Well, let's talk about that. An issue, it seems to me, in the campaign between the two of you has to do with who can be effective on Beacon Hill and in the State House of Representatives. So let's rephrase the question just a bit, and let's start with Lindsay this time, Lindsay Sabadosa. Why do you think you would be effective with those priorities that you have?
Well, because I've been at the State House. I mean, this is the work that I do. I go to the State House, I bring people to the State House, I participate in hearings, I meet with legislators, and I know who the people are who are already on that team. I know what the Progressive Caucus looks like. I know how many seats we are down in order to get a progressive majority in the State House, and I already have those partnerships. And having been endorsed by progressive organizations in the state, I already have these people who are looking to mentor me, who are excited to work with me, and who understand that when I say I support single-payer health care, it's not a question of I support it as a concept, I support its real, true implementation in the near future. And those are the type of things that are going to need to be effective starting right away, and things that I'm really excited to do, quite honestly.
And let me turn to Diana Zinal and ask you the same question.
Right, so obviously, I'll be effective because I'll be able to draw on my experience. And the experience I had working for Peter, who couldn't have been a better teacher and set a better example. The work with him means that I also have relationships with other legislators. It means that I have relationships with secretaries from the different departments and people in agencies, key players in state agencies. And that really becomes a big issue as you're moving forward with both legislation and with community issues. In terms of endorsements, I'm really proud to say that I've been endorsed by people that are chosen leaders in the area. Mayor Narkowitz has endorsed me, District Attorney David Sullivan has endorsed me, John Sybeck, Rep. Kulik, Ellen Story. I have more coming, and I have endorsements coming from constituents. Those are the ones that are the most important, because all of those people, but in particular constituents that I've worked with, know very clearly my work ethic, and they have faith in my ability to make good judgments and my ability to be effective. And so being recognized by local leaders in that respect is something that makes me very proud.
Well, we seem to have gotten to the topic of endorsements. Let me turn back to Lindsay Sabadosa and ask you if you can tell us what endorsements that you are proud of.
Well, I'm really particularly proud of my endorsement from Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts, because they chose this as one of only 6 races in the state that they wanted to become involved in, because they believe that I am best able to actually articulate what progressive values are. I'm also incredibly proud of my endorsement from NARAL. When I spoke to Senator Chandler, she said, NARAL is what helped me win, so make sure you get NARAL. And I have been a reproductive rights advocate my entire life, so that's
NARAL being the National Abortion Rights Action League.
Thank you, yes, indeed.
Not the unicorn of the sea. That's a narwhal.
That's a narwhal. My daughter would love it if I got a narwhal endorsement.
Me
I don't
too.
know how to do that,
To
unfortunately.
go to the sea.
Well, I got Sierra Club's endorsement, so maybe narwhals could come through that way. I don't know. I can
Yeah.
check with them. But also, Mass Alliance, which is a coalition of labor and social justice. And then I've also been endorsed by SEU 509, so getting a labor endorsement for me was just essential, because unions are the backbone of our society.
And feel free to dodge this question. I would not usually say this to candidates, but if you have not come out and endorsed in any way, you can skip it until the time being. But I would be interested to know if you have taken a position on whom you would most like to work with if you're elected with the state Senate race that's going on right now. Lindsay Sabadosa. Oh, let's go with Diana Zinal first, please.
No, I'm not going to actually endorse anyone. I'm obviously watching all of that very closely, but I'm going to stay in my race and stay focused on my race.
I'll allow it. What about you, Lindsay Sabadosa?
You don't have another really effective question.
No, I mean, if they've already come out with it, I would be interested in knowing that, as I don't know it. But if they're not comfortable saying it now, it seems a fair one to dodge.
Yeah, there are 2 people in the state Senate race I like.
But you're not going to tell me which. Okay,
I
good.
don't know. We'll see. We'll see
Lindsay
in beanbag
supported-
endorsements.
You did publicly support Chelsea in the Gazette on May 8th.
Which was before other people joined the race.
Right, which
So-
is a good reason to not do those things until you have a clear picture of what's happening politically.
I have a lot of respect for Chelsea being the person on the ballot, and I think that is worth saying. I have less respect for people who jump races.
See, that turned into a good question, didn't it, Newman?
That was pretty good. What else do you have over there?
Oh, no, it'll come to me. I don't prepare ahead. I just go with my gut.
Well, I'd like to ask you both this question, and tell you, I've been struck by the work of Eric Lesser, Senator Eric Lesser, because it seems to me that he has a passion for this issue of east-west as well as north-south rail, which has gone nowhere in significant measure because of the politics of putting a rail east-west in Massachusetts. But he's been pushing and pushing and pushing, and it seems that he's making some progress. So you say Eric Lesser, Senator Lesser, you say, whoa, rail. I'd like to know, after 2 years or 4 years in the State House, if you were to win this race, how would you like to be known? You were the rep who did what? So let's start with Diana Zinal.
I would like to be known, I would really like to be known as the rep who really worked hard for education, both pre-K through 12 and public higher ed, particularly in this area of public higher ed, making an investment in the university. So education will be my priority. We've talked about that on the Bob Show, and I would really like to be recognized as having really, really bolstered education here in Western Mass throughout the state.
Lindsay?
Medicare for all. It's an easy question for me. It's what we need to do before we can do anything else.
We'll explain that a little bit. Why?
Sure, it's because our state budget is consumed by healthcare costs. It's 42% of our budget. If we're going to talk about funding transportation and education and the many things that we really do need to address in this state, we are going to need to solve the healthcare crisis. And the way we move forward with that is by moving towards a single payer system.
And is that possible?
Yes.
Given the overlay of Medicare and Medicaid?
Yes.
How?
Well, it's going to involve bringing all of the right people to the table. There is already legislation that we've been fighting to pass for many years now that describes exactly how that would be funded. But, this is something that can be done at a state level. It's something that other states have looked at, and we need to examine those models, see where they failed, where they succeeded, and move forward as a Commonwealth, because frankly, the federal level they're not going to do it on the federal level anytime soon.
To start our second segment, if I might, by telling you a very brief story about an interaction I had with Peter Kokot. And there was a criminal justice bill on the floor. And I was talking to Peter at an event that day or the day after, and he said, look, he was talking to me and to David Hoos, and he said, I really appreciate your input. I want to know what you guys have to think. I want to know why this is a good bill or a bad bill, because we have thousands of issues that we're supposed to take a position on and vote on, and it is impossible for a rep to know the nuances of every issue. It's just not possible. And so the question that I have for you both is, and I want to say this in honor of Peter, who I really admired and feel very, very sad about his death. I'd like to know who you would rely on for advice. So let's start, if we might, with Diana Zino.
So I've been relying on John Sybeck. John and Peter were very close. Of course, I miss Peter, and I can't tell you how many times I've thought, since he's gone, both in the district work and in the campaign, who do you think I'd like to speak to the most? But John Sybeck has been really great, and he's somebody that I can rely on and ask questions, whether it's about policy or process, but also, he's familiar enough with the district and all of that. So he's somebody that I've relied on quite a bit, and Steve Kulik, I would add to that. I've had conversations with Ellen Story as well. So locally, we have some really committed legislators and public servants that I've been able to rely on and tap in that way.
Lindsay Sabadosa.
So I really liked that question, because it is so true that we cannot rely on representatives and elected officials to be the experts on everything, and we can't. They certainly aren't. There's that saying, you either think you know everything or you think you know nothing, and it's much better off to think you know nothing, because it's probably closer to the truth. So in this campaign, it's been very important to me to talk to as many constituents and experts in various fields as I possibly can. I'm constantly taking meetings with people and sitting down and saying, we're trying to, criminal justice was a great example. We are trying to write a plank to the platform that is about criminal justice reform that really speaks to what the omnibus bill didn't do and where we need to move forward. And what are those things that weren't included, and what do you think of this? And sometimes, I have an opinion about something, and I talk to an expert and they say, well, actually, this, you need to look at it, you have to reframe the question. You have to think of it from a different perspective. And unless you are bringing in the activists, the organizers, the experts, the academics, the economists, and talking to all of those people, you're never going to have a full view of an issue. I think that this job really involves an ability to listen, and to not just listen to a few people, but to listen to many. And that's who I would rely on.
I certainly didn't mean to give the impression that I haven't been doing the same exact thing. So, I've sat down with the sheriff. I've sat down with people providing treatment for addiction. I've sat down with people who work in the immigration field, the same thing. And that's something I've had the opportunity to work with local activists, local nonprofits, things like that over the last 16 years to really have a deep understanding of issues. So I've been able to tap those resources for a very long time.
I'd like to ask you to expand on both the last question and the previous one. I asked about what would you like to be known for after a term or two, or in the House of Representatives. And Diana, you mentioned and named education. And Lindsay, you mentioned single payer. I'd like to ask you, What are two other issues you really feel passionate about? Lindsay, let's start with you.
Well, I certainly would like to work on the east-west rail, which I think in a way is a misnomer because it's really about creating a corridor. So this is actually regionalized transportation, right? We already have north-south, east-west creates the Hartford-Boston corridor. So I think that that is an essential piece to this puzzle of making sure that people are able to live in this area, to opening up affordable housing, to making sure that there's economic development here. We need to be connected. And then certainly education, because it's creating disparity. It is based on economic inequality, and that's something that we need to change, the way we're funding our schools.
Did you take a position with regard to the most recent spending bill in the House about education, which was criticized as being inadequate, but praised as being at least something in terms of changing the funding formula under Chapter 7?
Welcome to Massachusetts. I mean, insufficient, but at least something is sort of what happens at the State House. So, I mean, absolutely insufficient.
Do you have some thoughts about that, Diana Zinal?
Do you want me to go back to the other thing, or you want to talk about the
I'd like to talk about the education piece, and then we'll go back.
There were some good pieces in there. There was some money pumped into helping pre-K educators further their education themselves. I was happy to see that. There was, the regional transportation money, which helps the schools fund other things. That should be more as well. When you look at that, there's about $68 million for regional transportation. There's $32 million for MCAS, which just seems like a lot of money to spend on something that I'm not sure we really need or is effective or really helping us in any way. And that money, that $32 million, could be spent other ways. So I would agree. I mean, there can always be more, and that's what I'm hoping to do moving forward as I really focus on education.
Did you take a position with regard to question 2, the expansion of charter in the last election cycle?
I was completely against the expansion of charter schools.
And Lindsay?
Against the expansion. I think we need to keep the charter school cap in place.
Okay, let me go back because I didn't mean to shortchange Diana Zinal on the question of what other issues other than education are you passionate about?
Right, so education and healthcare are things we've talked about quite a bit. My other two issues, I would say, are economic development, bringing new business to the area, fostering and incubating small businesses in the area. We love our small businesses here in the 1st Hampshire District. There's some agencies doing really good work with that, and I would want to very much support them legislatively. I keep talking about this project in Hatfield that I'm working on. That's an expansion of a business that manufactures an energy efficient product. I mean, if you can expand your tax base, that opens the door to be able to do a lot of other things, right? You can then put more money into education, and you can then, fund your local budgets at a much higher level. You bring in quality jobs. It folds into the housing crisis that we have here, and people being able to afford to live here. And then the other thing is agriculture. I'm always going to be passionate about agriculture. Coming from Hatfield, it's a really important component in our town, but I think it is across the district. I'm married to someone who grew up on a farm. I know that both in terms of the environment and the economy, agriculture is really critical here. And so that's something that I will always work very hard to sustain, make sure that our farms stay sustainable.
And do you have a specific, while we're on that, do you have a specific proposal that you would turn in or try to turn into legislation with regard to helping farms?
I would support legislation that allows them opportunity to become more energy efficient, which will then free up more money for their operations. I think that we need to focus on the APR program, making some changes to that make it a little bit more attractive to farmers, so that allows them to retain their farmland.
So which program?
The APR program, Agricultural Preservation Restriction.
Would you like to respond to that, Lindsay?
Well, I just want to say that one of the things that actually would most help farmers is solving the healthcare cost. As a self-employed person, I buy my own health insurance. So farmers are in a similar situation where they are buying policies, and that is incredibly expensive. It doesn't offer complete coverage, and many people can't maintain coverage and maintain their profession if they can't keep their family insured. You know, lack of healthcare is something that is a deciding factor in what people do for work. So I think if we're going to support our farms, healthcare is the way to go.
The bottom line is that all of it's all intersecting priorities. None of them stand alone. They all intersect, and we have to be able to focus on all of them.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back and we'll talk further with Diana Zinal and Lindsay Sabadosa, candidates for the 1st Hampshire District in the Democratic primary the day after Labor Day, believe it or not. We'll be right back. I'd like to begin our last segment with the two of you by asking you both, what has being in this race, what has being a candidate, because I believe you're both first-time candidates, at least for this office, what has this process taught you, first, about the district that you didn't know? Let's start there. Lindsay?
I'm not sure that I've learned something new about the district, but it certainly reconfirmed things that I did know about the district. Listening to people talk about what they care about, things really boil down to a few issues, and I think that really is true regardless of where people fall on the political spectrum. I was at a door the other day and was speaking to a man who I'm pretty sure was a Republican, even though he didn't come right out and say it. And we had a very long conversation about solar energy, and he was really in favor of that. He also thought we should build pipelines, but he was very firmly like, we need to invest in solar. And so having those conversations is really interesting, because you do understand that we can find a lot of common ground if we know how to talk to people. Being a candidate, though, I think the thing that I've learned the most is that people don't want to hear you talk as much as you think they do. They want you to listen. They want you to sit and listen to their stories and their concerns and take that into account. And that is the most important thing that you can do. I mean, coming on the radio and talking about my values is fun, and I really enjoy that, and I have a lot of opinions about things, but the best part of this is the conversations and hearing from people who have said, no one has ever talked to me before, no one's ever shown up at my house, no one has ever asked me my opinions on these things. That's eye-opening, and what makes being a candidate so much fun.
Well, let me turn from Lindsay Sabadosa to Diana Zinal.
I would agree that the best part of this is the people, being able to really reach out and sit down and chat with people. Of course, I'm hearing over and over how much people loved Peter, and that's a really nice thing for me to hear. But in terms of learning about the district, there's always going to be more things to learn. I feel like what I've experienced as I move about is people being grateful for what I already know about the district, and moving about the towns and people knowing that my experience and that I've already dedicated so many years to the district has been a really nice and affirming thing for me. So knocking on doors, making phone calls, going to events, participating in things with people has just been really terrific. I'm looking forward to the next month, because there's going to be a whole lot more of that going on. And that's certainly, of course, and that will be the best part of serving too, would be working with people.
You're endorsing the idea of campaigning in 90-degree weather in August. I don't know about that. Please don't codify that.
I actually think it should be codified, though, quite honestly, because we lose out when we have people who are in office for years and years and years and they don't knock doors every time they're reelected, because they aren't having those conversations. It's a brilliant thing to go out, and I know Congressman McGovern does it. Every time he runs, he goes out and he knocks doors, and that is what the ideal should be. Get out there, talk to people, regardless if you have an opponent or not.
I also think that another piece of this is to move the primary date. Why can't we be like other states in June? Why do we have to squeeze the entire campaign in, sorry to tell you this, between the day after Labor Day and what normally is the election day, which is a week or two later? That makes no sense to me.
Well, and it would truly serve the Democratic Party in the state of Massachusetts if we did that. I think, especially this year with the gubernatorial election, deciding who our candidate is going to be in September and then giving that person 2-ish months to run a real campaign and get name recognition out, that's certainly not helping us. I mean, it does, I imagine, serves incumbents, and that's probably why the Secretary of State has picked this lovely day right after Labor Day. But yeah, we need to change
Yeah, why
that.
why don't we have early voting for it? Why is it so difficult to get an absentee ballot for it? And why is it that date anyway? And why is this up to the Secretary of State to decide every election cycle?
Well, that's his job. But I
Sorry.
mean, early voting,
Sorry,
no fault
I
absentee.
have a position on this.
Yes, I see. No, but it's no fault absentee, it's early voting, it's automatic voter registration, it's mail-in ballots. There's a lot that Massachusetts could be doing and that we haven't done.
Diana?
I would agree with that.
Okay, well, let me change the question then a little bit, which is, the last question was, what have you learned about the district that you didn't know? And this question is more personal, which is, what did you learn about yourself in undergoing this process that you didn't know?
And this is Diana's, I know.
Right. You know, every day is a learning experience, and you learn about yourself. Being again, that interaction with people, and when they really want to talk about their concerns, but they'll listen to you as well. And so that's been really interesting. Learning about myself. I guess just really coming to a realization of the commitment that I feel, both to public service and to the district. That has just deepened and deepened and deepened the further that I've gotten into this campaign and the more people that I've reached out to. So I think that would be probably the most important thing that I've learned about myself.
The same question to you, Lindsay Sabadosa, something you've learned about yourself in going through this process of undergoing and undertaking this campaign?
Well, I came into this campaign already knowing that I had a very strong belief in moving our society towards a society that is more just, where there is not economic inequality and social injustices, because those are the things that I am most passionate about, eliminating those inequalities. And moving forward in the campaign, I've learned that I'm willing to do things that I didn't think that I would want to. The most crazy thing about this is printing your face on pieces of paper and handing them to everyone in your district. I didn't think that I would ever want to do that, and that doesn't mean that I didn't think I'd want to run for office. That running for office is great, but this idea of like, here is your face everywhere, that is strange to me. And because it is part of this process, it's something that I've become comfortable with and something that I'm now happy to do. But that's a little weird because it feels a little egotistical almost. But then you bring it back down to, well, actually, it's about the greater good. It's about actually serving people, and it's okay then.
We started, I'm sorry, Diana.
No, that's okay. I was going to add that another component to this that sort of surprised me was when I first saw my lawn signs going out, how humbling that was. I had been somewhere in Northampton, and as I came driving home, some signs had gone out. And I actually got very emotional about it, because when someone's willing to put your name on their front lawn, it's a very humbling experience. I had it happen before when I ran in Hatfield, but it didn't affect me that way. I think maybe there's a little more emotion tied to this election.
I'm so happy to hear you endorsing lawn signs, because I litigated the case with Land Cats that made lawn signs a constitutional right here in Western Massachusetts. We did that before the Supreme Court got to it, and I was accused by certain candidates of contributing to litter, being environmentally insensitive. We have just a couple minutes left, literally 2 minutes left. We started with, why should I vote for you? How about a final statement of between 30 seconds and a minute from both of you? Let's start with Diana Zyman.
Why you should vote for me?
Yep.
Well, again, I'm just going to keep hammering at the experience, and particularly the experience with the components of this job that don't get talked about often enough. And that is the budget, and that is assisting communities with the needs that they have, and interfacing with state agencies and moving forward with important infrastructure projects. The experience in doing that is really critical. It doesn't come overnight, and constituents and local officials need to be able to rely on it right away. And so I think that's that combined with a strong progressive agenda is what I'm relying on people to vote for me for.
Lindsay Sabadosa?
Well, I believe that my progressive values, which I have, I believe that my progressive values, which I have lived my entire life, which the community knows me for, are what best represent this valley. And you should vote for me because of that, but you should also vote for me because I'm going to bring people back into this process. I believe in a new type of government, a new type of energy in government, and a new type of courage in government that we have not seen.
Diana Zano, Lindsay Sabadosa, our candidates for the Democratic nomination for the 1st Hampshire District. The nomination will be decided, the election will be decided the day after Labor Day in the Democratic primary. So go vote. Thank you both for being with us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.